Hello, everyone, and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm your host, John Fortney, the Director of Communication for the Ohio Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Sitting in this week for President Matt Huffman is State Senator Michele Reynolds, a Republican from Canal, Winchester, Ohio. That is in Central Ohio. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
You know, we're only 5 editions in to On the Record, and it generates last week on Friday a national hit piece by the Associated Press, and I have it right here, called "Misinformation is Flowing Ahead of Ohio Abortion Votes. Some is coming from a legislative website. Oh, say it isn't so." But that headline is the real misinformation. Were you surprised that this would actually be a story by the National Associated Press, challenging not only your columns within On the Record, but also State Senator Christina Rogner's columns on the record?
So, John, I'm not surprised, as this is a very controversial issue, as we both know. And Election Day is Tuesday, November 7th. And there's been a lot of out-of-state money spent on this initiative. And so I am not surprised that they're trying to do all they can to really uncover or to cover up the truth. And what we're doing is uncovering the truth.
Yeah, we're going to go step by step down through some of the accusations within the story itself. But there's 3 people basically cited within this, and they also did quote me. But there are 3 main sources complaining about On the Record were all far left-leaning sources, including Red Wine and Blues. So first of all, I would just like to simply say thank you for the great national promotion for On the Record. Really appreciate it. Anytime that you have California and coastal elitists that are complaining, along with state house liberals and the media complaining about the website, that is priceless promotion that you just can't buy anywhere. And we'll continue to move forward. And remember, when we're talking about political speech, the U.S. Supreme Court probably has some very strong opinions about protected political speech. One of the very first accusations within this story, it talks about, among claims asserted in one senator's article, that the measure would, quote, legalize abortion on demand at any stage of pregnancy. Would you agree that that is the case, that issue 1, the way it's written, could legalize abortion on demand at any stage?
Absolutely, John. All we have to do is look at the ballot language. In the ballot language, it actually tells us that that abortion can go beyond viability if it's sanctioned by a doctor. And we as a General Assembly would not be able to stop a doctor from making that decision. So clearly, Roe versus Wade is actually a lot more conservative than this ballot initiative.
And you really put your finger on that, because the amendment, and if you have a chance, it is well worth the read. The state's top lawyer, which is the Attorney General, Dave Yost, his office released an 11-page opinion about what exactly issue 1 would do and allow if passed. So you can find that opinion on his website. From page 7 into 8 regarding on-demand abortion, this is what his opinion says. The amendment, issue 1, likely also protects post-viability abortions under certain circumstances. On one hand, it says that abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability, but then it puts that assessment in one person's hands. On to page 8. That person's hands, the doctor performing the abortion. It provides that in all cases, the doctor determines whether the fetus is viable and whether the pregnant woman's health justifies the post-viability abortion. In addition, the amendment does not define health. And previous court cases have said health, when not otherwise defined, can include other concerns, including mental health and familial factors, such as how many children someone has and maternal age. All told, the amendment's new standard goes beyond pre-Dobbs law under Roe and Casey, which is exactly what you said. So the misinformation is actually being reported by the Associated Press in this story. Indeed, late-term abortions based on the health defined in a very ambiguous way could happen.
Well, these are the same people that call abortion health care. And
For
abortion
whom?
is not health
The baby?
care.
Right?
Right. Abortion's not health care, it's extinction.
The second allegation within the Associated Press story says would allow for the dismemberment of fully conscious children. That is also one of the with some of the sentences within I think it was Senator Rogner's column. And so, well, let's talk about that for a moment then. Let's go to page 9 of the Attorney General's opinion. It talks about Ohio's partial birth law was upheld in federal court under the Casey test. Those laws would both be invalidated, and these abortions would be permitted. For both methods, current Ohio law requires doctors to first initiate the death of the fetus, such as by injecting a heart-stopping drug, before proceeding with the termination of the pregnancy and removal of the fetus. Those restrictions would likely not survive under an exclusive scrutiny test if Issue 1 passes. Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. That's the 20-week limit. That's what the General Assembly passed in the last GA. Ohio law bans abortions after the 20th week post-fertilization based on the research, this is important, based on the research that indicates that a fetus can feel pain at that stage. If the baby in the mother's womb can feel pain, it is aware of that pain and conscious of that pain. So I would suggest that we stand by the language within our column regarding the pain a baby could feel in a late-term abortion. Would you agree?
I agree with that. And, even pro-choice people, most of them, if you look at the polls, do not agree with late-term abortion up until birth. They don't agree with that. And so that's really what we're talking about here. We can equivocate on whether someone should or should not have an abortion. That is not necessarily what we're talking about. What we're talking about is enshrining this in the Constitution and making it where our General Assembly is not able to put guardrails in place or not able to protect life and not able to make sure that there's equal protection under the law. This is going around the General Assembly and enshrining something and putting it into one person's hands to be the judge and the executioner, and that's not okay.
Also, this is not the 1970s or even the 1980s anymore. We have medical technology called ultrasounds that you can see the baby moving inside the womb, sucking its thumb, putting its hands over his or her ears. So you can see how far the baby is along and the viability of the baby, and also medical technology, for that matter, can save premature babies weeks and weeks that were delivered early.
And as a mother who's carried children, I can feel a baby moving. I can sing to the baby and it will respond to me. And so I know that. I know, because I've been there, how life really does matter. And, it's cruel and unusual to terminate a pregnancy or a fetus, to terminate a child up into birth. That is just cruel and unusual.
Yeah, let's face it. We are talking about a baby. Right. One of the third accusations within the Associated Press story really addresses the speech that you made on the floor of the Senate, a very moving speech about the origins of Planned Parenthood. And I just want to read the accusation right here. Another senator's entry in the column that they're referencing repeats without context, a decades-old narrative that high rates of abortion among black women are driven by an, quote, evil and, quote, predatory abortion industry. You stand by
Absolutely.
the words evil and predatory. And based on your floor speech, you were talking about the origins of Planned Parenthood. And let me just take you back to the floor speech. Why was it important for you to talk about Margaret Sanger, and the origins of Planned Parenthood within the black community?
I thought it was really important that the black community understand, especially we are impacted disproportionately by the abortion industry. For every 6 black babies that die, it's 6 to 1. 6 black babies are aborted to 1 white baby. All lives matter. But there's a rhetoric that is always spread in the black community that Black lives matter. And they have to matter to us first. And I needed my community to understand that we have a right to live and that we don't have to buy into the propaganda that has been given or handed to us, especially from the Planned Parenthood abortion industry, when their very own founder, Margaret Sanger, who is a eugenicist, actually it was her plan to put these in poor neighborhoods and black neighborhoods. She established the first one in New York. And guess what? It's been a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, a lot of times we're saying, but the police are killing us, or, there's a lot of violence against black people. But I want my people to understand that it starts with us, and that you can't say Black Lives Matter if you are okay killing black babies through abortion.
The New York Times, in fact, wrote a story. And so while the AP was saying what you were saying was misinformation, the New York Times would even agree with what you're saying, because when the AP says without context, the New York Times, which reported the legacy of Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger, said, quote, includes supporting eugenics, as you described, a discredited belief in improving the human race through selective breeding, often targeted at poor people, those with disabilities, immigrants, and people of color. The head of the abortion giant's New York branch, Planned Parenthood New York, explained they were even taking the founder's name off their building because of, quote, Planned Parenthood's contributions to historical reproductive harm within communities of color.
There it is.
There it is. So all 3 allegations and accusations alleging misinformation in this National Associated Press story are incorrect, are all false. And so we thought it was important that we could go step by step down through the story. But again, not totally unsurprising, and about perhaps they have some internal polling, Planned Parenthood does, that says they're trending the wrong way as we come up on Election Day. What would be your main message about issue 1, whether it's derived from your floor speech or from the columns that you have on our website on the record? What's the main thing that you want people in Ohio to know?
Well, I think that we need to really take a look at this issue. It's a very complex issue. It's not black or white. And I think a lot of times we want to make it one way or the other. But the reality is that we're talking about mothers, and we're talking about families, we're talking about babies. And I don't think that we should be pitting mothers against their own children. I definitely think that there's work that we need to do in the legislature of supporting expectant mothers so that they don't feel like their backs are against the wall and have to make this as a choice. But the option of abortion, depending on what the vote comes out on Tuesday, people are going to tell us where they stand. And in the event that we are blessed enough for this to get overturned, I still think that there is work that we need to do at the legislature to be able to make some work on the heartbeat bill as it relates to defining what health actually means, looking at viability in weeks and things like that. I think that we cannot ignore what the general populace is saying, but here's my message, is that give us the opportunity. That's why you elected us into public office, is to be able to sit down and write laws that are more reasonable. And a lot of times, sometimes it doesn't end up like that when you're dealing with majorities and supermajorities. But I guarantee you that we are listening. And we don't need to bypass our legislature. That's why we have separation of powers. That's why we have a legislature and a General Assembly. We have our court system. But when you just put things in the Constitution where they don't belong, then we're going to really have a problem here in Ohio.
One of the issues, too, regarding the abortion issue, issue 1, is where the legacy media editorial boards land. Normally, editorial boards are more left-leaning. They're more liberal. That's been the way it has been for decades, and it's understood, and it's opinion, and that's fine. But it's, I think, very telling when the Toledo Blade editorial board came out in opposition to issue 1, saying it goes way too far. And then Cleveland.com, the online edition of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, decided it would not issue an opinion on issue 1, which sort of tells me that if they won't even take a position on it, that it's far too radical for them to even want to talk about.
That's correct.
So, do your research, read the amendment, take a look at the Attorney General's opinion, and I think you'll find it very eye-opening. I wanted to move on to something that you have taken on the road. You are the chairperson of the Senate Select Committee on Housing, and you held the first committee hearing on the road in Cincinnati. Well, it's not the first committee hearing. The very first one was at the State House. Yeah. But this is the first one of many more on the road. Why is it important for this committee to go to communities around Ohio?
So we really need to address the affordable housing crisis in Ohio. It's been an issue for a long time, however, because we are now in a place of economic prosperity where we actually have Intel and other businesses coming to Ohio, we really need to address not just housing, but housing accessibility, affordability, and the lack of inventory that we have here in Ohio. And so I am very grateful to be in this role. I'm very grateful to Senate President Matt Huffman for entrusting me with this because housing is my background. And so we need to go around the state to actually hear what is the scope of the problem and how how people are being impacted in their parts of the state. The goal here is very simple. It's to come up with recommendations, looking at solutions from a solutions focus of how we can play a role in the state of trying to develop more housing so that we can make sure that people have the spaces that they need in order to be able to work here in Ohio.
And the challenges can be different from
Absolutely.
Cincinnati to Columbus or Cleveland or Toledo or Marietta or the rural communities. So it maybe is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but would you agree that home ownership is still the first step to wealth?
Absolutely.
Building?
And that's really what it is at the end of the day. You know, home ownership is the key to generational wealth, and it's the American dream. And so we want to make sure that that dream is accessible to people to be able to do that. And what a better time than, you know, when we actually have these opportunities on our horizon to really grow our workforce and expand all of this economic opportunity here in Ohio. So we have to address housing. I'm very grateful that we're being intentional about doing that and looking at it, but also being able to work alongside our local government, local community, to be able to do something together where we can reimagine what housing looks like in Ohio.
There's already been some very eye-opening testimony from some of the organizations that represent housing and the more lower-income communities and about what they need, what they think would work. And a lot of it is even people who are working maybe 2-3 jobs, but you can't afford an apartment.
Absolutely.
So how and then, well, I need to be close to where I work because I'm either going to take public transportation or I have to walk there. Mm-hmm. So when the rent is $1,500 a month,
right,
that can be really a barrier to entry.
Absolutely.
And we want people to be part of the workforce. We want them to be taxpayers and independent of the government.
Absolutely. And with inflation, you know, costs are going up. And it is very unattainable for most people to be able to really live a good life in terms of being able to afford their housing and all their other responsibilities. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing the right things to move along with the trend so that everybody can live, work, and raise a family in Ohio and achieve that American dream.
You can find the Select Committee on Housing that Senator Michele Reynolds chairs by going to ohiosenate.gov. Click on committees and you will just have to pull down and find it. It's very easy to find. Do you know when the next committee hearing is and where it might be?
Yes, so we will be going to Marietta next Friday which is November the 7th, I believe. We're going to Marietta, I'm sorry, November 17th.
17th.
Yes, we're going to Marietta, and so we're very excited about that. And then on December the 1st, we will be in Cleveland, Ohio.
Super. State Senator Michele Reynolds, Republican from Canal Winchester, thanks so much for your time today. We appreciate it. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for tuning in to the President's Podcast right here on The Record, and we'll see you soon.